Production funding for Houston Have Your Say, provided by Sterling Bank, world-class banking, deep Texas roots. Houston Have Your Say is produced by Houston PBS in partnership with the Center for Houston's Future, Houston Community Newspapers, and KUHF, Houston Public Radio.
Particularly in the Houston region, they're all interrelated, and how the three work together will determine our health, the quality of our lives, and our future. I'm talking about the 3 E's: energy, the environment, and the economy. Can we make it work? I'm Patricia Gross, and I'll be moderating tonight's program, during which you will have the opportunity to have your say about air quality, the future of our energy sector, and our economy. As the energy capital of the world, what do we need to do to continue our leadership while complying with more stringent environmental standards? Global warming, the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, our so-called addiction to foreign oil, and the recession all force us to rethink our future. Houston has the second largest petrochemical complex in the world. The industry employs thousands of residents and pays millions in local property taxes, but with those benefits comes a certain level of risk. How much are we willing to live with? According to the Center for Houston's Future's report on air quality, parks, trails, and trees, despite the hard work and considerable expenditure by the industry, Houston's air quality remains among the nation's worst. This at a time the Environmental Protection Agency plans to tighten standards. On today's program, we'll look at the solutions that are on the table. You can participate by calling 713-741-8357. We have bloggers here in the studio tonight. Please join the conversation online at houstonpbs.org/haveyoursay. The show is also airing on our partner radio station live on KUHF 88.7 FM. So let's begin the conversation. Over the past few weeks, we asked Houstonians a couple of questions about energy, the environment, and the economy.
I'm not surprised.
Yes, I was aware it is one of the most polluted.
It looks like it. There's a lot of traffic and whatnot, and I think that probably adds to the pollution.
I don't feel affected. I drive an SUV. I pay for the gas that I burn in it. And I don't believe the climate, global warming story that it's ruining everything. I don't believe that.
No, I don't think we should. No, I think that was devastating. I can say I didn't see it personally, and the most that I saw was on the news. And I would like to think it didn't impact my family directly, but I know that it does.
It's almost imperative that we support the oil industry because of jobs, and we need the oil.
No, not at all. Drilling is not something that we should continue doing, not only in Houston, but all over our nation, all over our world. We shouldn't drill more because it's not a resource that we can renew.
I think that we should continue for a time in order to maintain somewhat of energy sustainability, but we should increase our regulations dramatically and actually enforce them rather than have the laissez-faire style of managing the oil industry.
Well, it might open more jobs for us, and it'll affect it hopefully in a positive way.
I think it would definitely increase the Houston job market. It's one of the energy capitals of the world. So.
And as far as economy, I think it'd drive a lot of jobs towards Houston if everything were to take off correctly.
It'll hurt us. All those regulations will hurt everybody, including Houston.
I think it'll dramatically increase it. It could turn Houston to the new New York. I mean, we'll have... we have more Fortune 500 companies in this city than any other city excluding New York in the country. And that'll just triple that by bringing more and more energy providers to the city. to the city?
I think it's vital to our resources, it's vital to our economy, it's vital to what we do on a daily basis. Obviously, without oil, we can't hop in our cars and go to work, go to school, go out, see family, see friends. Our daily life is really impacted by the use of oil.
So we'll start our discussion on air toxics and air quality with our first panel. Laura Blackburn, the president of the Houston Area League of Women Voters and the air quality chair for the league. Matthew Tejada, the executive director of Air Alliance Houston. Dr. Winifred Hamilton, director of the environmental health section at Baylor College of Medicine. Jim Griffin, plant manager for Dianal America and the president of the East Harris County Manufacturers Association, which represents more than 125 petrochemical companies in the area. Thank you all for joining us. And you all get 30 seconds to sort of tell us what you think about air quality in Houston. I know you need more time than that, but for now. Laura
To identify
Blackburn.
myself, yes, I am Laura Blackburn with the League of Women Voters. I grew up in the east end of Houston. That's one of our problem areas. I lost a husband early, I am persuaded, due to air quality problems. Therefore, I am extremely interested in air quality, particularly air toxics.
Thank you very much, Ms. Blackburn. Mr. Tejada.
I'd like to start off by saying that we have seen some significant air quality improvements in the Houston region, particularly over the past 5 to 10 years. But we have not crossed any finish line yet. We still have severe problems with ozone, which are only going to be further highlighted when the new ozone standard is released later this year. We have problems with air toxics. We're going to have a problem with particulate matter. But we have the answers to these problems if we have the courage to really look behind how we regulate the environment, how we regulate industry, not only in this state, but in this country. And the starting point for that is in the Houston region. We can do a better job, we can use new technology, and we can make our air quality and our health here in Houston so much better if we have the bravery to really try.
You just mentioned health. Thank you. Dr. Hamilton.
That's my lead-in. If you don't have your health, as they say, everything else falls apart. I believe that Houston can be a leader in a healthy economy and in healthy residents. I think that one of the things that we're not doing enough of is thinking holistically about health. Everyone is exposed to many pollutants from many sources. We have air pollution, water pollution, food. We have the environment in which we grow, which may be nurturing or may not. We have, whether or not we have green space, whether or not we can walk. Obesity is a epidemic here in Houston and elsewhere, and air pollution plays a role actually in obesity. We have to think about healthy neighborhoods. We have to think about healthy homes. We have to think about a healthy region, and I think we can do it, but we really all have to work together.
Thank you, Dr. Hamilton. And Mr. Griffin?
Thank you. In East Harris County, through hard work, I think we are achieving a balance of good jobs and clean air. Industry has made significant reductions in emissions. Let's take ozone for an example. There's two components that make up ozone, and we've cut both of those in half, one by more than 80% over the last 10 years. We've spent $5 billion in technology to do that. It's taken a lot of hard work. We're meeting standards set for the protection of health and the environment. And in some cases, we're even doing better than the standards. And with this, ECMA members provide more than 300,000 jobs to the community. For example, the products that we make, they're critical to our daily life. It's the piping that provides clean water. It's the medicines that we use and need every day. And it's the protective clothing for armed forces. Going forward, we all have responsibilities for improvement in meeting those standards for better air quality and East Harris County manufacturing. We look forward to working on that.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. And I'd like to start with Mr. Tejada, because a lot of people, including me, really, air quality has a definition. You can talk about ozone, you can talk about air toxics. So when we're talking about air quality, what do we mean? It
really depends on where you are when you ask the question, who you ask the question to, and when you're asking the question. If I'm standing on the corner of Clinton Drive and Federal over on the north side of the Ship Channel, I'm probably talking about benzene and particulate matter. If I'm in Sugarland or northern Brazoria County, I'm talking about ozone. If I'm in Manchester, I'm definitely talking about benzene and butadiene. But air quality altogether is the mixture of things that we put into the air, whether they're coming from point sources, mobile sources, our cars, our barbecues, the local dry cleaners. All of these things have an incredible impact on public health. So when we're really talking about air quality in the Houston area, we're talking about public health. These things, all of them, have incredible negative impacts on people's lives, whether it's lung health, cancer, developmental disorders. Winnie mentioned something that just came out recently about diabetes and about obesity. There's further studies that just came out recently about connections between air quality and certain birth defects. When we're talking about air quality, at the root of it, we're talking about making sure that all the people that live in the Houston region, whether on the Ship Channel or over in Katy, that they are growing up healthy.
Another definition question is Laura Blackburn with the League. When we say we are the most polluted city in the country, or one of the most polluted cities, I think we have this race with Los Angeles. What does that mean?
What that means in that particular instance is ozone, once again.
Okay, so ozone is really the bad guy.
And unfortunately, yes, Houston and Los Angeles tend to be first. One is first one time and one is first the other. But all they're talking about in that particular measure is ozone.
Dr. Hamilton, we keep hearing that there's a correlation between bad air and health. But are there studies done that actually prove that there's a correlation? Or is it difficult for you as a scientist to prove that there are correlations between bad air and certain health problems?
The federal government has health-based standards for 6 pollutants, of which ozone, particulate matter are 2 of them. Those health-based standards are based on an incredible amount of very strong evidence. The European Commission, Japan, Australia, we're all working from the same data. It's very, very strong health data. It's clear ozone can cause asthma. It exacerbates asthma. Fine particulate matter can go right through your lungs into your blood vessels and cause inflammation and lead to clots and lead to heart attacks and strokes. This data is very, very strong. Where it gets confusing sometimes are in diseases that have very long latencies. By that I mean it takes a long time, perhaps for cancer, to develop. You might have it for 20 years before you actually are symptomatic, or Parkinson's disease, in which 75% of the neurons in a particular part of the brain have to die before you get symptomatic. There are many environmental factors involved. 90% of all disease is environmental, and that's a broad definition. That includes nutrition, physical exercise, all those and pollution. So in those cases, it is difficult, and particularly with our medical system, in which we don't have great data to be able to follow someone for their whole life and know where they were exposed and how they were exposed. So in those instances, it can be difficult to track down exactly what caused somebody to have leukemia or brain cancer. But in some other instances, it's very, very clear.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Griffin, we've heard in the last couple of weeks there's a standoff between the EPA, by the way, they couldn't be here today, and the TCEQ, and we have a representative here from the Texas Commission of Environmental Quality. Can you tell us what the standoff is? I understand it's over flexible permits. Can you explain what that is and what the problem is? And then I will go to Dr. Honeycutt.
Sure. Flexible permitting is relating to air permits. Plants like the plant that I'm responsible to operate has an air permit. And flex permits have been used in the state of Texas for about 16 years. We're very pleased with the results. We show improvements more than any other state. And we think that permitting system works. The issue that the EPA, I believe, has is not the performance, because the performance has been there. It's more around the policy and the procedure.
Policy and procedure. We have here Dr. Honeycutt with TCEQ, toxicology, the chief of toxicology. Mm-hmm. How do you see this standoff between EPA and TCEQ?
Well, I don't know if I would call it a standoff. I mean, the TCEQ and EPA have, ever since the beginning of regulatory time, had differences of opinion on different topics. And a lot of topics we still agree, and we're hand-in-hand, work collaboratively on. This is something we'll work out. I mean, we've had differences before. We worked out those differences, and we'll work this out.
What are your thoughts about flexible permits?
Flexible permitting in a lot of different facets of the air permitting program in Texas, we don't see as actually having helped improve air quality. We've seen them, if anything, being an impediment to air quality. And from the very beginning, Our problem fundamentally with permitting in Texas is that it is so complex and so opaque that a citizen, even a regulator, struggles to understand exactly how a plant is regulated by that permit. The levels, the conditions, the details to the permit. There are so many loopholes, so many conditions, so many exceptions to the rule that it makes it difficult at the end of the day to sit down with a stack of paper and actually understand for a large or a medium or a small plant, how is that plant regulated? Even the regulators have difficulty with sitting down with that stack of paper and understanding, well, what am I actually looking at the end of the day? And any regulatory system that fundamentally starts off with that sort of difficulty can never really regulate effectively or efficiently. And the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, for as large as it is and as capable as it is, the last thing we need to do is make it even harder for our state agency to regulate the entities out there.
Do you agree with what he just said? It's too hard for us, right?
Well, I mean, just drive by a facility and take a look at it. I mean, every little bolt, every little flange, every little piece of equipment you see out there, every pipe has to be regulated. And there's a lot out there. So those permits are large and cumbersome and hard to write and hard to regulate. But, we do the best we can, and I think we do a pretty good job.
What do you think, Mr. Griffin?
Well, I've been in the industry 30 years. I've been responsible for air permits. Appreciate it as a plant manager. You have to sign off on the integrity of those permits, and you're responsible for that. Are they complex? Certainly. They list all of the raw materials used, the finished products completed, all of the process flow. They are quite detailed. There's summary documents, of course, executive summaries that summarize permits, but the detail is certainly there.
Ms. Blackburn from the league.
Nobody yet has defined what a flex permit is, which is an overall permit for a facility rather than for the individual units.
Right.
Exactly. And so the EPA says you ought to regulate those individual units. TCEQ says the flex permit has worked fine for us, and it has worked. Whether it's fine or not, I question.
Yeah, I call a flex permit a bubble permit. It's a bubble over my plant, captures everything that exits.
But when you get to that bubble and you look at the levels that a plant emits on an annual basis, and just for an example, let's say that a plant emits 5,000 pounds of sulfur dioxide a year. And then if you can actually sit down with the flexible permit and find the sulfur dioxide limit for that plant, and it's 17,000 pounds per year, which is not an outlier example. That's an example we run into time and again, where the actual permitted limit is several times more than what we've ever seen emitted from that facility. How is the public ever supposed to take comfort in the fact that that permit is effectively regulating that facility if there is a space of several times more than what is ever emitted allowed?
But you want us to run way below our permit level. That's what I would want.
We want you to be regulated at your permit level as well.
But the permit is based on safety in the community. So, I think it's a compliment to a facility that is run well below their permit level, and appreciate that every emission source in a plant has a cap on it, has the maximum amount that can come out of that emission point. If you go over that, it's a reportable quantity. It has to be reported to the commission within 24 hours, and they investigate.
Now, there are some that do better than others. This was an email question by Jim. I read in the New York Times, ExxonMobil in Baytown's refinery, the nation's largest, has an annual cap on volatile organic compounds at 6,200 tons, more than twice the 3,000 pounds per year the federal permit would have allowed. So my question, has the Texas program not achieved the same emission reductions the federal program would? Does anybody want to answer that?
I think it's a good question. And the problem with it, again, kind of like when asking about what is air quality, is every time you ask somebody that question, you get a different answer. Texas will give you one answer, EPA will give you another one, and then if you ask an environmental group that sits down and looks at the permit and looks at the actuals, you'll probably get another answer. And that is the underlying fundamental flaw, I think, to permitting in Texas, is that there's not one clear answer every time you look at a permit. You can come up with multiple answers, and then when you compare that to the actual emissions that are reported, it's a different number. That is not the way to regulate these complex industries. And it's not a matter of complexity in permitting. Of course there's supposed to be complexity, but complexity gets to a point where it starts to defeat the intent of regulating.
Dr. Hamilton, are there areas in Houston where you see more cancer rates, more asthma rates? I mean, where you don't want to move there because it's too dangerous for your children to grow up there. Can we have proof of that?
There are hot spots, and that's one of the things that my particular group at Baylor College of Medicine is particularly interested in. So we do modeling, looking at hot spots, and there certainly are communities. It's complicated because it's often a hot spot. It's your susceptibility in part to getting sick or being in the hospital related to air pollution, but that also may include whether or not what your income level is, what your education level is, what your race, ethnicity is. All those factors play in what your nutrition is. So all these things together may help us define these areas where you are more susceptible to get sick. And we do have distinct hot spots in the Houston area, but like I said, they're complex. The air shed is shared by all. So in many cases, the ozone levels are not going to be highest along the ship channel, although many of our air toxics will be because they are emitted there. But ozone may be higher in the Aldine area or in the woodlands. So it's difficult to say. And in the house that's very, very tight, you may spend 90% of your time in your home. So most of your exposure may be from dry cleaning fluids and formaldehyde in your home, whereas the outside air may not be that much different. It is true that along some ship channel communities, some communities near sour wells, definitely do have higher air pollution, outdoor air pollution loads that they have to contend with.
This is another question that we got from a viewer. What is happening with the coal-fired power plant, I think it's called White Stallion, near LaGrange, and how will that affect our region here? Anybody want to take that?
It's a different plant is out near LaGrange. White Stallion is actually down by Bay City in Matagorda County.
Are they both coal plants?
They're both coal plants. The LaGrange plant is also a coal plant. There's also another one down in Corpus Christi that is soon going to be permitted. I think it's going to have a huge effect on Houston's air quality. We've spent hundreds of millions of dollars in this region. We have spent countless man-hours trying to improve our air quality in this region. And now we have just permitted, we've given a very expensive piece of paper to a new plant that is going to be proposed for about 10 miles outside of the Houston non-attainment region in a county that has not had to do that heavy lifting. But it is going to be directly in the windshed of the Houston area. And the modeling that they did to show the ozone impacts, they might as well have tried to show the impacts of that plant on New York City, because there was absolutely no relevance to the proof they gave to the state on the impacts that the White Stallion plant would have on the Houston region. And they are going to put so much of the pollutants that cause ozone, of things like mercury, of particulate matter, into the airshed, into the local area around Bay City. And nobody asked those questions at the state before they gave them that permit. The environmental groups did, local community did, the county judge from Matagorda County said, we do not want this plant in Matagorda County, but it was given anyway.
We have
Jen Powis with Sierra Club's Beyond Coal campaign. And I just want to highlight what Matt's talking about with White Stallion. The modeling that TCEQ required didn't address the airshed or the air pollution that would come into Houston, and that puts Houston industry at risk. As many of the panelists have stated, Houston has taken tremendous effort, spent millions of dollars trying to improve our air, but if TCEQ's permitting program is so broken, so flawed, that it doesn't take account for such a huge single source of pollution 10 miles outside of our 8-county non-attainment area, that's a real problem.
Does anybody want to respond to that? I mean, I think when we get a power plant somewhere else, we think, oh, well, it's happening over there, but it's actually coming here too, so it's affecting us as well. We'll discuss it in a second. We would like for you to join our conversation online at houstonpbs.org, have your say, or call us at 713-741-8357. Let me repeat that number. It's 713-741-8357. Now moving on to our next segment on securing our energy future. We interviewed Rice University sociologist and creator of the Houston Area Survey, Dr. Stephen Kleinberg, and the CEO for Citizens for Affordable Energy and former Shell CEO, John Hofmeister.